And welcome to another exciting episode of Triple Tap. This is episode number 43. Welcome, Kent. Welcome, Lance. How are you both this evening?
Thanks, Ainsley. Doing well. It's good to see you.
You're probably wondering why I'm dressed like a bumblebee tonight, right? I am buzzing. I don't know about you, but we've got a really exciting episode tonight. And because I love bees so much, I love honey, I love bees, we've got a really exciting guest that we're going to be speaking to tonight. And there's a number of different areas that we're going to be speaking to or with. So ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for joining us this evening. We're going to have a little pit chat with Lance and Kent before we get underway, and then we're going to invite our guests to come on and share all the different things that we're going to speak about in their area. So stay tuned and be ready to ask your questions in the chat. But first, as always, I like to have a chat with these guys because they're so busy. I don't often get to have a chat with them during the week. So who would like to go first this week and just tell us, what have you guys been up to? Because I know it's been pretty exciting today and yesterday for you guys. Lance, maybe do you want to go first, Lance?
Oh, look, why not? I sort of did point for Kent to go first, but yeah, look, it's always an exciting week when we're doing what we're doing, and it's incredible. We've got an incredible team. Ainsley's right. We have lots of business to get through, but we don't have a lot of time to chat, so it is good. Today we completed the treaty process between 3 sovereign nations that are internationally recognized. These are tribal nations and first in time, and that process has now been agreed to, ratified, put into document form. That's the first time we've had sovereign nations treaty on this land in an official and recognized capacity for over 250 years. So that's a pretty cool event. And that opens up so much for the rest of the people on this continental mainland to bring back rule of law, to bring back proper governance, and to correct the record that has been struggling for the last 235 years to have any rule of law. So totally pumped, totally excited, incredible day, lots of emotion, lots of spirit, and we'll have some pretty impressive documents to show everybody in the next couple of days.
Excellent, Lance. That's really, really exciting, guys. And I hope all of you out there listening are following what the Australia Project is doing to help these sovereign nations. Follow along on the Telegram chat, their main Telegram chat, and also go to TAP Project Updates to be able to keep up to date with bits and pieces on the various initiatives and projects that we are undertaking. So, Kent, how has your week been? You've been busy as well.
Yeah, well, I've been helping with everything that Lance has been talking about. I've also been reaching out to the Waka Nation and tribes within the Waka Nation. The Waka Nation, we've recently discovered a map that details the old borders from approximately 240 years ago. And that map shows that they go from the Brisbane River north all the way out around Cherbourg up to just south of Rockhampton, which is quite a large nation with many tribes in there. And it will be exciting and challenging to see that nation reform and go ahead and join that treaty process as well. So we're right into it, Ainsley.
That's excellent, guys. Let me just quickly share my screen so we can get on with tonight's introducing tonight's speaker, just while that's loading there. And guys, if send some good emojis or love and comments in the chat if you're excited about what TAP is currently up to, what you've just heard, what the guys are working on with the sovereign nations. But tonight, let's get into tonight's speaker. I'd like to introduce her. Her name is Nikki Florio. It's all about saving the pollination and saving the planet. She comes from a company called Be Heroic. So let me just go ahead and tell you a little bit about Nikki before we get started. Nikki Florio is a lifelong environmental activist. She grew up in a small farm town in Central California, and as a young adult, moved to Lake Tahoe, California. After completing college, she founded the Tahoe Regional Environmental Education, or the TREE program, a tri-branch sustainable business, lifestyles and education program. Through TREE, she hosted the region's first fully integrated green building, sustainable foods and green communities expos, and educated thousands of students, community and business members each year through the outreach programs. After closing out TREE, she spent several years as a sustainability consultant and then moved to Colorado, where she created Be Heroic. Be Heroic spent several years touring the Western states, presenting on issues of climate and ecosystem collapse that mainstream media and educational venues would not. Agrochemical, geoengineering, 5G, the Internet of Things, and true sustainability. Be Heroic's mission is to provide an information to action platform for initiating practices that will save and protect Earth's bees and all of its extraordinary pollinators from near-term extinction. So be aware, be proactive, and be heroic. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I'd love to get excited and give some love in the chat for the queen bee herself, Miss Nikki Florio. Oh, how are you, Nikki? It's great to have you here finally.
Good, good. Thank you so much for having me.
Excellent. So just before we get started, Ken, we can't hear you if you're wanting to talk, but just tell us a little bit about where you're up to at the moment, Nikki. What are you actually doing at the moment?
Right now, we're working on a few different projects. One of the projects is a full community project. It's a kind of a safe haven freedom community. And we're going to do a little bit of consulting on that. And then we were more recently asked to help consult on a geoengineering lawsuit. And then I have my regular work too on the side.
Wow. Nikki, I got to speak to you very luckily about 12 months ago, and we caught up prior to the meeting here this evening. Why don't you give us a little general overview about Be Heroic and the sorts of things you're getting into now with it? Like right now, I can see that you're in an Airstream. We call them a caravan, but you're in an Airstream. Whereabouts are you, and what are you working on right now?
So right now, I'm in the foothills of California, and we just got done. You may have heard they had a what they called an atmospheric river go through California, and it dumped a bunch of snow and then a bunch of rain. So we lost about a month of kind of on the road work. So we're just playing catch up right now, and we're meeting with a handful of farmers and different ag groups in the next probably week or so, week and a half. And then we'll probably start our other projects. And then we have a trip up to Oregon.
Right. And all that snow and that rain that's been dumped, because last time I was talking with you, we were talking about the geoengineering and the chemicals being dropped in the sky, which should not be on top of pristine Rocky Mountain mountaintops, but are on top in those pristine areas. What about this weather, this sky river that you just told us about? What about chemical drops? And I know you've lost some research, but you know, how's it going with those chemical drops in your region?
Oh, so that the aerosol geoengineering is occurring all the time, all over the world, and it's something you can see on even general maps, like for example, the NASA Worldview website. Every day you can get a glimpse of that. You know, the satellites go over and they take a single day image, and everywhere all over the world you can see these aerosol projects going on, and so geoengineering is occurring for different reasons. Right now, there are projects going on all over the world that are going through science foundations. There's other experimental ones. About a month ago or so, a young startup group did a geoengineering test over Mexico. Did you hear about that?
No.
So there's a company called Make Sunsets, and it's a startup group of a bunch of young tech kids who are funded by two different venture capital groups, and they're all techie, but none of them know about natural science or natural systems, I should say. And so they did a project over Mexico, and MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, published the fact that they did this project, and it whipped up a big storm, so to speak, because neither the environmental director, nor the president of the country knew that they were doing that project. So it was executed without informed consent. So the result of that was that the president outlawed all the geoengineering projects. What the president doesn't know is that just off the coast, those projects are occurring all of the time. So in the Pacific, I mean, all of our oceans are. And do your listeners all know about geoengineering? Do they all know what it is?
Yeah, they do.
Okay, good.
Yeah, we've got people who help us in the project that Lance Ainsley and I are all part of, called the Australia Project, who have out of their own pocket collected rain samples, had that rain analysed, and they've located the powdered aluminium, the bromine, the chromium, and they've got proof that it's there. And you know, we've got a lot of people in Australia saying, oh, look, it's not real, but you know, as far back as 2006, we see representatives from major countries in the world, certainly the US, at the UN, trying to get this stopped. And of course, those people have all been removed from their positions, no longer able to complain about this type of geoengineering. And of course, it just goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
Nikki, can you tell us? Sorry, Ken. Can you tell us how the geoengineering and the altering of the weather and things like that has an effect on like the animals and then the things around, particularly obviously bees? We're talking about the bees and the pollinating and how we all know how crucial bees are to our planet. Can you delve a little bit deeper into the importance of that?
Yes. So with even with Bee Heroic, most people know about honeybees. Honeybees are one of 20,000 species of bees, and they evolved with the flowers about 100 million years ago. But almost all insects are pollinators. Almost all winged and terrestrial insects are pollinators, and a bunch of different small animals, from primates to the little shrews that are along the Australian coast, and bats and other animals. But because honeybees especially are so vital to agriculture, they're not the only bee that is, but they're very important. And then in ecosystem, of course, all of these different insects, from beetles and ants to even gnats and male mosquitoes and things like that, they're all, they all pollinate. When you have geoengineering, most people focus on the single technology, the aerosol technology. There's about a dozen technologies in all, but the aerosol technologies kind of set the foundation for these other technologies. And when you have these nanomaterials, aluminum, barium, strontium, all these other nanomaterials, and they float to the ground, they're impacting the soil microbiome, which impacts everything else, the soils and even waterways and things like that. So with the aluminum in particular, if you just want to take that for example, because it's a nanomaterial, it goes through the soil and the roots take it up. And aluminum disrupts a plant's ability to take up both moisture and nutrients. But it's also brought up through the plant, and it's expressed in both the pollen and the nectar. So several years ago, there was a study done with Dave Goulson, who's one of the world's top bumblebee experts, and Dr. Ellen Rotheray and Dr. Chris Exley, who's also a neurologist. He was one of the vaccine whistleblowers early on for neurotoxins. But they got together and did a bumblebee study. And what they found is that that bumblebees were emerging or coming out of the cells, and they were coated with aluminum, and it had a dementia type effect on them. So they weren't doing well at navigating. They didn't remember basic, bee tasks and things like that. So that's just one element. But animals are much smaller. Animals and insects are much smaller than us, so their rate of respiration is much higher. So they're inhaling more of all of this nanomaterial than we are, and because they have different iron structures in their blood, they're affected differently by the aluminum and barium and other chemicals. But even in geoengineering with things like filaments, when they release filaments from the planes, and you see all of these long stringers you walk outside and it looks like there was 1 million spiders that came overnight, only there's no spiders. Those filaments are very sticky, and the insects get wrapped up in the insects, or it wraps around their wings and things like this. And then they can't fly. And with animals like hummingbirds that regularly use spider webs to help build their nests, it impacts them as well. So with geoengineering itself, things like weather whiplash also have huge impacts on insects and pollinators, because in the springtime, and I'll just use California as an example, because we just had the atmospheric river come through. So we had a very freezing cold, as you probably well know. Canada and the US had the coldest winter on record. We broke every state's record this year for cold in the United States, including Alaska and Hawaii. And that engineered cool down super froze the top part of the soil, where a lot of the insects, especially the things like solitary bees, they live in the upper parts of the soil. But they had a warming period after that. And so in the areas where it warmed up really fast, like California, where I'm staying right now, a bunch of bees emerged. I saw honeybees, which they aren't ground nesters. Obviously, they're in hives, but I saw a bunch of sweat bees and carpenter bees and all these bees around this one single flowering bush, and everything else started to bud. All of the flowers started to bud, the leaves started to bud. So the insects were coming out. And then they did a massive engineered cool down. And in an area in the foothills right here, where they usually maybe get a dusting in the wintertime every couple of years, they had several feet. And then they kept that temperature freezing cold, so it killed off all the buds and everything. And then they took a torrential rain and washed everything away. Now, California had already had wildfires that impacted the soil, so this washed away a bunch of extra topsoil. So they did a second cool down, so it warmed up again. They did a second icy cool down, and now today it was very warm. And the tree that only, not even 20 days ago was filled with flowers. All the flowers were just on the ground dead. And all of the leaves that had just started to open on the deciduous trees, they're all seared, they're all burnt on the edges. So everything is, and there's other chemicals going on, because if you walk around, you can also see on the shrubs and the grasses and the other wildflowers that are budding, there's a lot of mold, which could be from some of they might be putting mycotoxins or something else in these aerosols. But it could be that there's also 5G in the area, and 5G causes mold proliferation. So the combination of these things is having huge impacts on animals and insects. And so if people really want to help the animals, you really have to work on stopping, 5G and things like that. Now, pollinators, we just think of pollinators, we just think of animals as the only way to pollinate plants, but for millions of years, hundreds of millions of years before pollinators got here, or generally the general populations of pollinators, plants were pollinated by water and wind. The trees, for example, pine trees.
Sure.
So when you still the weather, they have now what's called global stilling or wind stilling. So they'll stall the wind in the spring. When the plants start to express their pollen, they'll just stop the wind, and then that pollen eventually, will drop off, and then they'll just do a super wind and just gush it out. But they're really they have these systems dialed in where they can destroy an area. And I'm only talking about California, and this is happening all over the country, all over the world, as you probably well know. So these are all having big impacts. So if you want to help these animals and insects, you need to plant a lot more native plants. You need to get rid of 5G in the area or protect yourself. We work with a couple companies. You can see them on our website that have this is one of the companies called Noxtac. They have a disc that actually called a Spiro, and inside of it looks just like a regular disc. I don't know if you can see it, if it's backlit or not.
Yeah, no, we can see that.
So there's a bunch of little discs inside of it, and those break up the 5G. So you still get resonance from Earth, so you can sleep at night, but it breaks up the 5G, and they have a small square that you can actually slide into a hive to help pollinators in a hive recoup when they come back from an area that's got a lot of emissions. But geoengineering is what lays the foundation for everything. It breaks up all the moisture in the atmosphere. So 2G and 4G networks, those were longer wave technologies, but with millimeter waves, they don't travel very far. So you have to break up all the moisture for the transmission on ground to ground and ground to satellite. So that's one of the reasons that these other technologies are going in so fast. Anyway, that was a big tangent.
I've just got a question from one of our listeners, Nikki, and I'm sure I can feel this, like they wanted to put like a swear word in there. It's like, what are the evil mother's aims with the geoengineering?
Oh, what's that?
What are their aims? What are they trying to achieve?
What are their aims? Well, if you control the weather, you control the world. So,
Wow.
A third of all industry on Earth is directly connected to the weather, and that's agriculture, agrochemical, mining, communications, transportation, military, energy, and both conventional energy and green energy, because if you can block the sun, you can make sure that no one gets energy from solar. And if you block the wind, or if you freeze the system, you can stop turbines. And then it's one of the reasons. So Bill Gates is, you probably know, is a huge investor in geoengineering, and an investor in agrochemical. He owns 500,000 shares of Monsanto, and all kinds of other investments. But he knows that they can block the sun, and he knows that everyone's trying to stop petroleum, even though he's got nearly $1 billion invested in big oil. But he's also just received a federal funding. I think it was 700 million or something like that, to start up his own green nuclear company, which will then be funded by the taxpayers and probably global populations eventually, because nuclear would be the only thing that can be unaffected pretty much by weather as an alternative fuel source. So anyway, they're doing it so they can control us. So could control the economies, you control the people, you lay the foundation for telecommunications. People who are injected or inhaling nanomaterials, especially metals or self-assembling nanostructures, they can be more easily controlled by telecommunications. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Go ahead, Lance.
No, like, I mean, Bill Gates is obviously, he's an imbecile, right? He's not highly intelligent. He's not highly creative. He's just a puppet for the operation behind the scenes. But they promote these people, like Gates, Musk, all these people. They put them forward, make them heroes, so we worship them, and they bring credibility with the narrative. They're promoted by the mainstream media. But when you scratch, there's always the same bunch of rat bags behind this operation. It's normally Soros money. Soros is funded by the governments of the world, funded by the world banks. These guys, their wealth is given to them. They don't create their wealth. So they're not miraculous. They're not intelligent. People like Warren Buffett, it's all an illusion. It's all smoke and mirrors. What is their objective with this insanity? Because we share this planet with them.
When you have narcissistic personality disorder, or you're a sociopath or a psychopath, you especially don't think that any of this is going to affect you. And they've been in the game and they know what's going on a lot longer than we have, than we know. I mean, I was lucky and unlucky in that I knew about Gates, a couple decades ago. And then in 2010, after he, purchased, after the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation purchased 500,000 shares of Monsanto, and they had their outline for sustainability, I knew that wasn't right. And then, when he got into all of these other investments, and the same thing with Elon Musk. I mean, Elon Musk is not only is he not sustainable, his entire industry is not sustainable. He's a huge mining investor in deep ocean mining. There's not enough terrestrial cobalt and lithium, so he's got his project that goes from San Diego all the way out to Hawaii, the deep ocean mining project, and they're doing a bunch of 5G projects already, and he's got the bulk of the satellite contracts, and he has probably the bulk of the U.S. military contracts as a public contractor.
It's not hard to see when if you can create a situation in the weather where you destroy the sustainability of crops and you lower the yields for farmers, and if you're in the background creating seeds that you can market to people to say, well, because of these new conditions, I'm your savior. I've created these new seeds that will grow in this situation, but you also have to feed them with my chemicals and protect them with my chemicals. There's a huge amount of profit to be made in the short term. In the long term, Nikki, they're trying to kill the planet. I mean, surely they can see, or is it just, are they that stupid?
Oh no, they are intentionally wiping out everything so that they can own everything. So Bayer is the largest manufacturer of greenhouses on the planet. Or it used to be. I don't know if it is today. It was about 8 or 10 years ago. So when Monsanto purchased, when they purchased Monsanto, and Bill Gates is one of the largest seed holders in the world. He's now the largest farmland owner in the U.S. And he's probably never stuck his pinky even in the dirt. And his goal is to get meat off the market and go to genetically engineered meats. So prior to when Reagan was in office, when Reagan was the president, Monsanto had approached the FDA to put genetically engineered foods in the market, but he wouldn't do it. So Monsanto kind of courted Bush Sr. Bless you. And so Bush Sr. was how they got in. and Hillary Clinton used to work for the Rose law firm, which was Monsanto's largest law firm. So by the time Bill Clinton got in office, they had a very good foothold in the GMO market. And then by 2000 or 2001, Monsanto had already planted its millionth acre of corn. And from there, it just exploded. And a lot of people know about the basic GMO crops, the initial ones, corn, soy, canola, and wheat. But what they don't know is it has exploded since then, and now includes apples and potatoes and tomatoes and coconuts and then all of these other foods, strawberries, foods that people love. And so a few years before Bayer purchased Monsanto, they were talking, and the CEO of Bayer was interviewed, and they asked him, what he thought of Monsanto and GMO foods. And he goes, well, GMOs are pretty antiquated now. And he was saying that because he was referring to the incoming nano and bio marketed foods. So bioengineered and nano-engineered foods. And so Gates has always been invested in those things. But they also, Monsanto and other agrochemical companies, Cargill and Syngenta and things like that, they all engineer different animals like salmon and hogs and cattle and different types of insects. You may have heard of Oxitec. Have you heard of Oxitec?
No.
Oxitec is I think it's a British company, but they started releasing mosquitoes about 10 years ago in Florida, a genetically engineered mosquito that was a male mosquito that was supposed to breed with a female mosquito and make her sterile, but they failed miserably. The researchers that followed up on all of those tests said they failed miserably. Now, California has had a drought for the past, 5 or 6 years, or the entire West has had a catastrophic drought, but they decided to release those same mosquitoes in counties throughout California in the driest years in history. And almost no one knew about it. I mean, it didn't really make mainstream media, but what they did in the meantime is anytime that it snowed or rained, they would do a mosquito release within that moisture. And we never have generally don't have mosquitoes. California is a pretty dry state. You just, if you're up in the mountains and you're in a meadow and it's, mid-spring, you'll have mosquitoes. We have these big, huge mosquitoes in the Sierras and all the way up into the Cascades. But the genetically engineered ones are tiny. Sometimes they can even fit through screens when people have screens. Now, this particular mosquito that they're using is one that fights yellow fever and dengue fever. I think it's called Aegis aegypti or something like that. I can't remember the name of it. It's this engineered mosquito.
Aedes aegypti.
Yes, thank you. And it's one of the only mosquitoes, it's one of the only insects that's, when it's exposed to radiation, millimeter wave radiation like 5G causes dielectric heating. In insects, it cooks them from the inside out. But with this one, it warms their body up. And for some reason, I don't know if it's because of their size, researchers have said that it would make the insects have a broader range. It would move out away from the tropics because it could then stand the cooler temperatures.
Because of the 5G to warm them up. It's like an electric blanket.
Yes.
This is by design. This has been going on for years.
Yes. Yeah. So this insect, this is one of the ways they're genetically engineering insects. Another one of Bill Gates's pet projects is insect vaccination, using mosquitoes, putting an mRNA gene into a mosquito so that the mosquito can bite everyone for free. Why do
they want us to take this? Is this transhumanism thing true? They really think that,
Yes, this is all part of the transhumanistic agenda. And David Nixon, who works with Dr. Anna Macalia.
Yeah.
They've done all of the research. You've seen their slides on the
tech.
the self-assembling nanomaterials and graphene and other materials, and when those things respond to EMFs or microwave radiation, that's a way to control you. Now that the US military and DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, has been working on this for decades. Everything from BCI, the brain-computer interface, to different types of implants, to nanomaterials to help relax soldiers, to keep them from stressing out so they don't get PTSD. So it reruns their, it can affect their the expression of hormones, so that they don't get excited if they're killing people or if they have to bomb someone or whatever. The whole thing is by design. And there's a document that the U.S. military, you guys have heard of Owning the Weather in 2025, Weather is a Force Multiplier?
Yes.
Yes. So that was a 1996 document that outlined all of the technologies and the uses and how they could be, for example, how aerosols could be expressed remotely through drones or airplanes or whatever. Well, 2 years later, in 1998, there was a huge meeting in the US called Foundations 2025, a value model for evaluating future air and space forces. So the idea behind this was to develop a value-focused thinking model, so you could have you could identify key system concepts and technologies for achieving air and space dominance by 2025. So within this particular document, they did a big brainstorming project. So they had 43 different, they called it futuristic concepts. And so at the very top, they have things like projecting information and holding power. And they wanted, through projecting information, to be able to deceive, disrupt, and corrupt communications. And then on the foundation of Foundations 2025, for enemies, foreign and domestic, they wanted to be able to perpetually observe, collect information and surveil them. And then they wanted to be able to manipulate them informationally, physically, biologically, and biomedically.
Wow.
And then shortly around that time, or after that time, NASA hosted a big keynote event, or back then they were called PowerPoints, and did an outline of the nano and bio control, and then also owning and controlling ecosystems. And so DARPA now has everything from Insect Allies, which is a project you may have heard of. They can spread disease and do all these other things. And then also a plant project where the plants themselves, these are genetically engineered plants, they themselves act as sensors. So if you have a 15-minute city and you plant these plants and somebody walks through, they can be focused on and targeted. And in America, everyone's like, I got my guns. Like, your guns aren't going to do anything. They're going to help you. We have to stop 5G and geoengineering. That's the foundation. Yeah. Everyone is cutting off these upper branches, and they just got to whack out this poison tree,
Yeah.
So
if anyone was interested in that document that Nikki was talking about, Weather as a Force Multiplier, Owning the Weather in 2025, just go to the chat right now. The link is in there. You can grab that, but we will put that also on the replay when we put that up. And also the company that Nikki talked about in regard to Oxytech, that's also in the chat, guys. Just go scroll up and you'll find the links there that, as Nikki's talking about these, we're finding them and dropping in there so that you too can go and do your research and find out more. Nikki, a question that somebody's just asked in the chat, just going back a little bit in regard to the winged insects. They read that 80% of winged creatures are being killed. Is that true?
Well, winged creatures, if you're talking about, birds and bats and insects, yes. And in like a tiny, these little tiny island areas, not an island, but there are places on Earth where animals and insects are not as affected, but yes, 80+%, probably closer to 90 to 95% of and it's not just winged. It's not just winged. If you come from a farm town and you're older, like when I was a kid, I grew up in a little town where I was outside all the time. I ran and swam and biked and played outside all the time. And when I was in high school, we didn't have a big town. There wasn't a lot to do. So I would wash cars on the weekend. I'd go do neighbors' cars and stuff when I was a kid. And we had so many insects on the windshield and so many insects on the grill that, and they would be baked in because it was so hot. And there were butterflies and bees everywhere. And at night we had bats flying around getting the insects, and you could not leave your door open at night. You'd have to have a screen because otherwise you'd end up with a bunch of moths and lacewings and everything in the house. Today, nothing. I've driven, on the introduction when you noted that I had, when I did the tour, I drove halfway across the country and back 6 times in 2.5 years. And by the last year, by 2018, I would just have gnats and maybe 1 or 2 bees. And this is after driving across hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles of deserts and through farm areas. And you'd get through some farm areas where there would be one species, maybe of butterfly. So you'd have that butterfly, but you wouldn't have big combinations of all of these different insects. And because insects are food sources for geckos and lizards and birds and bats and all these other animals, including each other, when that population drops, so too do these other populations, and bird species are dropping as well. And a lot of, it started off being, pesticides and fungicides and herbicides. And then with 2G, it wasn't too bad. But when they introduced 4G in 2011, that's when we had the first news reports of birds falling out of the sky.
And it's now more catastrophic, right? Because 5G is more powerful and they're just dropping like crazy. So is there any way we can disrupt 5G? Another question from one of our viewers.
Yes, I saw that. Yeah, I saw that question. Yes, there's different ways to disrupt 5G. People who are kind of monkey wrenching. We'll talk about both, but people who are monkey wrenching, and I'm not saying you should monkey wrench. This is just some of the things that have been done is, farmers and people with big trucks have just pulled the towers down or pulled the 5G LED street lamps down. I've also, I've only seen one video, but I've heard a lot of people talking about getting Faraday paint and taking a drone and just dropping it on you just have to disrupt the signal. So you drop the Faraday paint on the towers. And then, during the beginning of the pandemic in the UK, they were catching the cell towers on fire. And then other people are just throwing boxes and things over the video cameras because they're the facial recognition things. So you're not damaging the property, you're just kind of covering it up. But you can also make a little Faraday tent and place those over the tops of you can, not that you should, but other ways to do it legally. There are legal ways to do it. In the US, people don't know that they can go to their local sheriff's office. The sheriff has, yes, I'm not condoning violence.
Yes. We just thought we put that disclaimer in there. Yes, to everyone. We condone or encourage
the reason
violence.
The reason I put that there is because one of our enthusiastic watchers put guns in the comment with a question mark. And look, and we have to be careful. And I know that you didn't suggest that, Nikki.
I'm not suggesting guns. No.
No.
Oh no. When I said guns, I was just saying, you can't protect, guns won't protect you from 5G.
No, they won't. No.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
A
So
question, Nikki, a question I'd like to ask is, because the solution is people. Okay, so you're in the States. If you had to say what percentage of people are aware and are getting to the point where they're prepared to start to provide solutions to solve these problems, what percentage would you put it on of people that are aware about how evil their government is?
right now it's a lot more than it was 20 years ago, and it's a lot more than it was 10 years ago, and partly because of this false flag.
Yep.
Because this made people go, oh, okay, so if this isn't true, then maybe these other things aren't. Maybe one in 1,000 people. I come from a really small town, Tahoe, and I had friends there for 30 years, 25, 30 years, that are no longer my friends, because from the start, I wouldn't put a mask on. I'm completely healthy. I knew all the people behind it. I knew Bill Gates' background, and I had already known about, and I'm not an anti-medicine person. People say anti-vax like that's something separate from medicine. It's not, but I'd already read about Bill Gates' polio vaccines. I'd already read about his MMR vaccines and all the poisoning and killing and sterilizing he had done in Africa and India. And so why wouldn't he do it to us? He's a megalomaniac. And so I just completely forgot the question because I was rambling. Sorry.
What percentage of people are ready to take action?
So every
Positive,
day,
peaceful action.
Well, and they are. People are more and more often. It doesn't make the media the same way that your news doesn't make it over here. We have to actually dig now, and it was tough at the beginning of the pandemic, but it's a lot.
Nikki, I know what you're talking about. The president of Switzerland and the chief health officer of that country are both being arraigned with formal charges for crimes against humanity. And the only place, now I heard that was the case, so I started looking. The only place that I managed to find that was on the front page of the Egypt Times newspaper. Everywhere else it's been sanitized from. Okay. But yeah, the sanitizing goes on. They won't let our news get out, and you've had to look. You got to look to find all these things. But people are beginning to wake up now.
Yeah. Nikki, what are some simple things that people can do in their own communities, obviously here in Australia and in their communities that we've got TAP satellite groups that form all around the country, and they're looking after the communities. What can people do in their communities to help in these areas of, the Bs and the 5Gs? What's some simple things that you can suggest that people can do for our listeners tonight?
Oh, for the pollinators themselves?
Well, yeah,
Sure.
just to save the insects, the bees, things like that. How they can maybe do something against the 5G.
So you can. So back to the other 5G aspects. I don't know the laws in Australia. In the US, our local sheriffs actually have more power for local law than federal law does. So they can deputize their community. But do you have something similar to sheriffs?
No.
All we have is corrupt police, corrupt federal police and corrupt state police.
So yeah, so that's a lot bigger. That's a lot bigger fight. If you go to city officials and you provide the information and you show them what is occurring. So the 5G space appeal, are you all aware of that?
No.
5G space appeal. Here, I'll put it in.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Do you see that? Okay. So the 5G space appeal is a phenomenal website. It's an emergency appeal. This is directly from the website. An emergency appeal to the world's governments by scientists, doctors, environmental organizations, and others. And so anyone can sign it. And they have thousands of scientists and physicians from all over the world. Right now, there's over 300,000 signatories from over 200 different nations and territories. And so within this website, they have they have a bunch of great information that you can download it. It talks about the differences in the technologies. It talks about the human health impacts and environmental health impacts and things like that. And we have a direct link to all of this on our website on BeHeroic.com. And then you can also go to Physicians for Safe Technology, and that's also on our website. And this is a wonderful website that discusses all of the scientific literature, and it reviews all of the different topics, from cell towers to health effects of wireless radiation and Internet of Things. And then it has a bunch of presentations from different physicians. So if you go to a school and you want to present to the parents, you can take that there, or take that information there as well. And I just put the MD Safe Tech in the website as well.
Excellent.
But with 5G, it's not just that 5G is on land and it's impacting human health and environmental health. The upper bands are being auctioned off, and 5G goes from 30 to 300 gigahertz. And when we were discussing, the birds falling from the sky, that we had those first deaths occur, and then the news just got completely silent because they were bought off by telecom. But with 5G, it was happening so often everywhere that it created huge problems. And Céline Fernot, who is the health minister of Brussels, after they did a test in the park and they found hundreds and hundreds of dead birds, she cut those projects off in her city. So sometimes you do have a very proactive city leader. So you want to show the environmental and human health impacts of those things. And the smaller your body is, the more susceptible. Now we have helial array antennas on our skin. So as the frequencies increase, at 30 gigs, some people are uncomfortable. I actually have, the reason I have these Knox tacks, these discs, is to show people, but I need one because I get targeted sometimes, and it's very uncomfortable, even at these lower emissions. But before he left office, Donald Trump started auctioning off higher and higher bands. It was the biggest spectrum auction in history from telecommunications, and this went to all countries. So with animals that are small, they have different magnetoreceptors as well, and birds have them behind their eyes. So in Washington, D.C., during the middle of I think it was 2022, I think it was the summer of 2022, all of these birds all of a sudden started having massive tumors around their eyes. And they called in these ornithologists and specialists who knew nothing about 5G, so they didn't even mention it. And they said, oh, we don't know, it could be just an infection of some kind. But it was all during the time that they were testing. But so it impacts even the same animals different ways. So for humans, at 30, 40 gigs, we're starting to really feel it, 30 or 40 gigahertz. By the time it gets to up to 60 gigahertz, it impacts the oxygen in the breathing air. So people have problems breathing, respiratory distress. And so in Wuhan, for example, where they were testing 5G, Wuhan is China's first 5G city, had 10,500 5G towers. And then Queens, New York, where they had the big outbreak. Queens is a small community, had 3 times the amount of towers within that small community than all of the surrounding communities. And then in the US, there was a Florida island chain, same thing, had a big outbreak there. In North Italy, outbreak there. And when they had the Disney princess or the cruise ship, do you remember at the beginning of the outbreak, there was a cruise ship everybody got sick on? Yeah, so that was one of five of the first cruise ships to ever have 5G. And the service provider for it wasn't AT&T, it wasn't Verizon or Sprint, it was Raytheon, who is a US military contractor.
Yeah.
So there are they have a combination. They've been playing this game a lot longer than we have, so they're way ahead. And everybody, we think we're playing chess, we're looking for the next move, but they're way ahead of us. And what we have to do is we have to flip the board. We just got to get rid of their technology. Then they can't play anymore. And
So,
that's,
Nikki, if you could explain something, when you said before Trump left office, he optioned these things off. Are you saying he opened this technology up to the market?
he so in the frequencies that are allowed. So, when you had dial up, we were still in the hertz range. And then with 2G through 4G, we went from hertz to megahertz, and then we got to gigahertz, which is millimeter waves, very short. So in that spectrum of 30 to 300 gigahertz, they had to auction off who gets to use which range, who pays for being able to provide that service. Now 60 gigahertz, the one that impacts our breathing, when that was auctioned off, a bunch of people got on board because that's the one that allows for a lot of different services all at the same time. It allows for someone to download a movie really fast while the person next to them is playing a game and the next person is searching for something. So it allows for all kinds of stuff and all these different devices to occur at once. And it also happens to be the frequency that's in Tesla vehicles. So that's not a very safe vehicle to be driving around in for a lot of reasons.
No. What an incredible story. This is all interlinked.
Yes.
This is all the geoengineering, the 5G, the COVID virus. This is the one big plot. And now we're seeing the collapse of the monetary system, the start of it. So the wealth transfer. It's incredible. One thing you said to me was they can stop the wind. Now that's prophecy, because we know when we're getting close, when the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse go to the 4 corners of the world and they stop the wind, right? So we know that they use technology to do these things.
Yes.
And this is what we're talking about. We had a guest on a couple of weeks ago, and he's involved in friendly weather manipulation. So we might send you that information so you can have a look what they do, because what they do is with extremely low energy. We're not talking about microwave. They ping the weather channels, he calls them, and they encourage them to do the right thing, not the wrong thing. So they're sort of talking to the planet with a code and asking it nicely to send us some gentle rain. Now,
Yes.
we've got that technology.
Yes. So David's technology is very nice in supporting ecosystems until we can stop geoengineering and let a lot more natural systems come through. And he can, his technology does more. He discussed his technology with you guys.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so that it's also more beneficial than other types of rainmaking because it doesn't use chemicals, and he's not taking from downstream communities, which is a really dangerous thing. Every 2 years, the American Meteorological Society hosts a conference on planned and inadvertent weather modification. So this last year was, I think the 23rd or 24th. So they're going on 50 years of having these conferences on planned and inadvertent weather modification. And they still talk about the same antiquated types of weather modification until these past two sessions in the 2018, and they skipped the 2020 because of the pandemic. So they did it in 2021. Those were the ones where they started discussing ice nucleation chemicals and geoengineering. Before that, they were still calling these big geoengineering projects basic weather modification. So,
Wow.
so there's a lot of action going on behind the scenes with geoengineering. It's just not made public. And in I think today or tomorrow in Massachusetts, I think it's Massachusetts, is a big geoengineering governance meeting with David Keith, who is one of the big geoengineering proponents of Harvard, who is funded through FISER, which is called the Fund for Environmental FICR, Fund for Innovative Climate Research. And Bill Gates is a big funder of that. So when you have someone that's being directed by Bill Gates, and he's also a huge investor himself in geoengineering. So when you have an investor who owns a company on a panel recommending geoengineering to help cool the planet, who has openly stated that geoengineering, and this is from his mouth, is like free riding on our grandkids, you probably don't want to take advice from someone like that.
But there's no conspiracy theory going on. There's no conspiracy going on at all, is there, Nikki? It's just all, you know.
Well, guys, we would love to keep chatting, and I'm sure, Nikki, we're going to have to definitely get you back. I know it's early hours of the morning over there for you, and we really appreciate you getting up or staying
thanks,
up
Nikki.
in the early hours of the morning to speak with us. Ladies and gentlemen, if you've thoroughly enjoyed listening to Nikki tonight, you can see that there is a wealth of knowledge there. We will put the links up to her website. You can see here, if you want to stay in contact with Nikki, her website is BeHeroic, BeeHeroic.com. You can also connect with her on Facebook. Guys, bees are vital for humanity and all life on the planet. So be aware, be proactive, and be heroic. Nikki, Florio, I would love to thank you so much for joining us. And have you got one last thing you want to say?
On our Facebook page, they have to put Be Heroic Now with the word now.
Okay, we will definitely make sure we correct that when we put that on the replay. But thank you, Ken, thank you, Lance, and thank you, Nikki, and thank you to all our listeners. You know, go out there, be aware of what's happening around you with bees and 5G and the environment. Be proactive, get involved, and do what you can to help your communities. And of course, be heroic, as Nikki Florio says, because each of us has a unique part to play in the healing of this world. So thank you very much, everyone, and we'll see you next time on Triple Tap. Bye for now.
Thanks,
Good night,
guys.
everyone.
See you. Thanks, Nikki.
Thanks, Nikki.
So much.
It was awesome.
Great to see you guys.
Thanks, Nikki.
Look,